If money is your thing, first of all, you shouldn't become a lawyer. If money is your thing, you should go into finance. Coming out of law school, I can't imagine another role where you're going to make as much money as you do as a young associate. But it doesn't come without sacrifice. I remember some years ago working on a transaction, and the partner missed his child's birthday party because our management team wanted to have a call.
Do you think lawyers in the US is a scared community?
I think there is some of that. There's a financial incentive for lawyers to be workaholic. This life is a marathon, right? We sprint.
Do you believe pressure is a privilege?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Never thought about it that way. You do need to pause. You need to refuel. You need to replenish. You need to recharge, because that's what's going to enable me to stick around for the long haul.
And where is the money, Anna? Is it in the in-house or is it in the law firms?
I mean, certainly.
Anna Lee, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. Nice to be here with you.
Thank you. Anna, I've seen how you have progressed in your journey, starting as an associate in a small company and then moving on. You have become a general counsel and chief legal officer at EFI. Tell me, how do good lawyers become great general counsels?
First and foremost is it requires curiosity. What I love about being in the General Counsel Chief Legal Officer role is the breadth and scope of the work that comes across my plate, and the types of matters that I deal with. It can be everything from commercial to product compliance to labor and employment to operations to M&A, right? It spans the gamut. And I think what I love about it is I'm curious about all these different areas, right? And I think lawyers that want to get to know different areas of not only law, but business operations really are great, can become great general counsels, and want to help the business and want to get to know a business. Um, I think, there's plenty of lawyers that can do the legal work, plenty of companies that outsource that legal work to outside lawyers to do, commercial transactions, advise on an M&A. But you really need someone who understands both the legal aspect as well as the business. And what does it mean to translate legal advice into actual operational advice that your business colleagues and the management and the board can actually implement and operationalize.
Excellent, wonderful. Was that taught to you in the law school?
Unfortunately, no. I think law schools, certainly when I was going to law schools, very fairly traditional, right? You take kind of basic courses, and you do take a legal writing course that teaches you how to write like as a lawyer, which is quite different than at least my background as a life sciences major and interested in research. But law school gives you the technical knowledge and analytical thinking to become a lawyer, but the actual operations of what you do as an in-house lawyer, to be honest, I learned it on the job. And I think, again, tying back to your first question, is because I'm curious, right? I'm curious about things. I'm curious about technology. I'm curious about people. I'm curious about business and success and operations. And I think because of that, um, I certainly have learned on the job. I'm sure other people have different experiences. One of my predecessors worked for 2 decades before going to law school. People come to in-house roles in different ways, um, but you hit upon a good point, which is there is a weakness, I think, in legal education today in terms of creating giving lawyers the skill sets they need, particularly for those that want to go in-house. I think today's law firm model develops folks for certainly law firms. Law school model develops folks for law firms. It develops folks possibly for doing policy and legislative work, again, depending upon what law schools you go to and what specialties and practices certain law schools highlight. But I think there is a gap for training lawyers to become in-house. Although I have seen programs and I've heard of law schools that are focusing on this. I think people are aware that there is a gap in the traditional legal education.
Do you think this gap can be filled up somehow?
I mean, I think it will never truly be, I think you can fill it to an extent. I think you can give people some tools, maybe a flavor, but truly, as you can see, many folks, the model, they don't go in-house directly, although there certainly are folks that go straight from law school to an in-house role. And that's great because I think that shapes them as the lawyers, continuing to stay as business operators. I think I've heard of courses. In fact, one of my uh, former colleagues and a classmate of mine even has created a company that is helping junior lawyers make that transition to becoming in-house lawyers. I don't know if law schools are truly going to fill that void. I think it's going to be done in partnership with outside parties, in partnership with even law firms that might do secondments, with internships. I think there's a number of ways, but I I think it'd be naive to think a law school really is going to fill that void on their own.
Absolutely. So, if there's somebody, a young lawyer who's listening to our conversation right now, he wants to choose a path. Should I become a partner in a law firm versus should I join in-house and become a general counsel? How can a lawyer choose their path?
I mean, I think about my own experience. I graduated from law school, joined a law firm. I had aspirations of becoming a partner because that to me was fed. That was what was fed to me as the model, right? You go to a law school, you do well, you go to the best firm, you do well, you rise the ranks from associate to senior associate to counsel to partner, and that at least was what was portrayed to me as the natural pathway for a very traditional law firm experience. I think what happened for me was a reckoning of this wasn't what I wanted for myself in life. And that didn't occur to me until some years later after being at a law firm and having a young family and seeing the sacrifices and personally experiencing some of the sacrifices that I had to make. At that point, it was okay. I don't know if I want to continue on this journey. I'd like to explore what my other options are, i.e., go considering in-house roles. So I can't. It's difficult for me to say that you do this and this, and you make that analysis because at least in my experience, you get there through being at a firm, experience what it's like, seeing how partners work, seeing how associates work. I only worked at one law firm, but certainly I have friends that have jumped firms, gone to different firms. You kind of see the different cultures of the firm, saying, "Is this the right place for me?" Um, but it's such a personal experience and a personal journey. It's what is your personality suited for? I was a litigator, but I had friends that loved doing transactional work, right? Doing deal work. Um, that wasn't where my brain, led. That wasn't the kind of what the approach I initially thought I would have. But here I am. I'm doing an M&A, and I consider myself a transactional attorney now as a general counsel and an in-house lawyer because I've had to learn it, but it wasn't what I initially thought I would be doing. So it's such a personal journey. It's such a personal experience. But I think everyone has a reckoning at some point in their career about what is it that I want for myself? What is it that I want for my family? Uh, and, everyone is going to have different views on what that is and what they want.
Beautiful, beautifully put. So, and where is the money, Anna? Is it in the in-house or is it in the law firms?
I mean, certainly the associates coming out of law school, I can't imagine another role where you're going to make as much money as you do as a young associate. There's law firms are throwing big salaries, lots of bonus, but it doesn't come without sacrifice, right? It comes with billable hours and a certain level of expectation. I think in the long run, if money is your thing, first of all, you shouldn't become a lawyer. If money is your thing, you should go into finance or create a company. That's where the real money is, not by becoming a lawyer. Although you certainly will be comfortable, I would say, and you'll have a very you'll have a skill set that is valuable, and you'll be comfortable, I would say, for most lawyers. Um, I think the money initially appears in law firms from my personal experience. But I think there can be a lot of dollars for particularly public company GCs. I mean, we just, the many public company GCs, between their salary, their equity, and the success of a company and the equity that they receive, it can surpass certainly law firm partner draws from what I've seen.
Brilliant. And also, lawyers can choose a growing company which is on the path of going for an IPO. That can also make them big bucks.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes. And it's a risk, right? And that's certainly, it's just like the startup model. There is the upside. There's so much upside, and there's some downside. And so it's a question of whether that risk is for everyone, and for those that have gone to the right company that has gone public or gotten the right investment or acquisition, it can pay, the payoff could be in dividends, right? So yeah, I would say, but certainly I start this premise with, if you're chasing money, I mean, lawyers are, I think, for the most part, handsomely paid, but there are other professions where are going to pay you a lot more.
Okay, so that's fair. You mentioned about sacrifices you made in a law firm, okay? And I've spoken to almost 50 plus general counsels and CLOs across US in my podcast, and we have spoken about sacrifices. And one thing I learned was from somebody was one of the persons told me, Amit, make sure you never pay too much for your money, which basically means a lot of lawyers in the US are paying too much for their money. They're like sacrificing, they're making, let's say, they're missing their kid's birthday party or a spouse event or an important function here. Are lawyers paying too much for their money?
I think they can. And I think certainly, I think what I've seen is the law firm partners do make a significant sacrifice. I remember some years ago working on a transaction, an M&A deal, an acquisition, and the partner leading the transaction missed his child's birthday party. Literally, the process of blowing out the birthday candles because our management team wanted to have a call to discuss some point in the purchase agreement. And that was the only time that certain management members were available. And so this partner had to sacrifice uh, seeing his child blow out the birthday candles on their cake. I felt so awful. It wasn't my choosing for that time. I wish I would have postponed it by 30 minutes, right, if I could have. Um, Certainly, lawyers make a fair amount of sacrifice for their clients. I will say, as an in house lawyer, there is sacrifice, no doubt, but we do have a bit more control over our time and our schedule and our calendar than I would say what I call an outside service provider, i.e., law firms as partners and associates. That experience, kind of seeing that transaction, a partner sacrificing, reinforced that I made the right decision by going in house. Because at the end of the day, we work hard because we care about our companies, but first and foremost, who's going to be with you at your deathbed? It's your family, right? Not the company, really.
Absolutely. So do you think lawyers in the US is a scared community? I mean, that partner could have easily told the management, it's my son's birthday party, my child's birthday party, and I want to be there, and can we have it next week? I'm sure management committee would understand. It's just that the apprehension in the partner's head of even putting his thought or request in front of the client, he could not even ask. So is it in our heads?
Yeah, I think, that's a good point. I think there is some of that, right? And I mean, I think back when I was a law firm associate or even a more junior in-house lawyer, um, you're so deferential to management and the people that essentially are your clients. And so I agree. There probably is some amount of deference to, well, that's when they're available, and so I will cater my calendar and schedule around that. But what I've seen, certainly now in my role, that when you say something like, I'm unavailable because of XYZ, the group generally is willing to work around people's schedules to an extent, right? When you're trying to corral 30 people in calendars, there's some limitation to folks being flexible. And for me in particular, I'm working with folks on the East Coast and in Europe or in China or in India, right? So there's a fair amount of, okay, being flexible to an extent because you need to accommodate the other side. But I think you're right. Maybe there is a little bit of, speak up or else, and make your voice heard. But being when you're doing deals and the deals are going fast and there's time and urgency, I think there's just we were certainly in the mode of get it done.
Yes. Coming to that point, I mean, since a very important point you mentioned, lawyers as we are trained to move fast and close the deal and do it fast, do it yet today rather than tomorrow. Do you think so? And in those speed that when we want to get things done, do you think parking fine? Do you think speeding tickets are better than parking fines? In the sense, when you're speeding too fast, you will get a few things here and there. You have to pay some fines, speeding rather than sitting at one. So, from a business perspective, as a lawyer, when you're advising your business, from a do you think speeding tickets are better than parking fines? Because when you're sitting down, parking, you're not moving too much. That's also you're paying a fine for that as well for not moving fast. So, do you believe speeding tickets are better than parking fines?
That's a good analogy. That's an interesting analogy. Um, Certainly, and I think about even just literally do when I speed, and is it worth speeding, or should I just follow the speed limit? And I'm going to unfortunately give you a lawyer answer. It's going to depend, right? I think speeding when you've fully calculated the risk, understand what the risk is in that speeding ticket, it's worth it, right? But I wouldn't speed at all costs, no matter the context, right? At the end of the day, you are still, upholding the integrity of the company. You still want to, be true to yourself, and represent the risks appropriately. And I think you collectively can decide when it's appropriate to speed and when it's not. And I also think if you speed constantly, you know, you will run out of gas, right? Whether it's your physical working, whether it's the speed by which management is making decisions. Oftentimes, management is making decisions. There's flow down effects to the business. The business can't speed constantly, right? You're going to pick and choose what items you want to speed up and what items you're going to slow down. But I think there's appropriate times to speed up, for
Mhm.
sure. And there's appropriate times when you put that one on the back burner and you say, let me take that. Let's think about that some more.
Perfect point. After speaking to about 50 plus general counsel across US, one thing came up. The marketing team comes to the general counsel, they want you to sign certain deal and you stop them. You put a speed breaker. You say, yeah, we can do it, but. And similarly, the sales team come and there's some certain clauses they come to you for to review and stuff, and you put a speed breaker. So our lawyers, our general counsels and CLOs are helping the sales team, marketing teams to speed, or are they considered as speed breakers?
So I despise the notion that folks think lawyers are going to slow down the business, because I certainly don't view that as my role, nor do I view it as the roles of my team, nor is it the the way my team runs and is integrated into our business. Um, Marketing and sales or operations and finance, pick the name of the cross functional group. They're going to come to us because they either have a contract in hand, or they have a sales agreement that they need to conclude, or they have a supply agreement that they need to, review before they're going to buy, right? So naturally, there are certain types of transactions and deals and pieces of paper that they're going to run by the legal team. Our job is to look at it, point out risks, identify issues, and sometimes it's as simple as, hey, you don't want to agree to that audit provision because it's going to be problematic. Let's do this instead. 9 times out of 10, at least in my experience, they understand. They're like, good point. We'll take it. We'll do what you recommended. Rarely are there going to be cases where we say, hey, this is a risk. It oftentimes lets them think about the risk. I like to take the approach of, can we do it this way instead? And they might say, oh, good idea. We can try that. They might say, no, 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 we can't do that because the customer needs X, Y, and Z, or we can't do that because, there's a time urgency, et cetera. But at least we've put the idea out there. And then, what I found is on the next transaction or the next deal or the next supply agreement, they might say, oh, why don't we try this instead because it was suggested to us the previous time. So I think what all this is to say is that I don't view us as slowing down the transaction. I view us as helping to partner with our cross-functional teams, generating ideas, sharing our learned experiences, giving them a moment to pause, to reflect on, is this the right way to do it? And then ultimately, they can decide, right? Typically, it's very rare that we say, you cannot do this deal. Usually it's, hey, have you thought about this? Or, hey, that looks good. We've done that before. Let's move forward. So the way I think about it, the partnership that my team has with our business and operations colleague is not as a deal breaker or the Department of No. It's getting to a smart yes.
Excellent. Getting to a smart yes. That's beautiful. Uh, and from your career, if you had to look back at your career, what mistakes did you make, and what can our audience learn from it?
Huh, what kind of mistakes? I mean, I'm sure I made lots of mistakes. Um, I think one of the mistakes I probably made um, early on when I transitioned from outside law firm to in-house was um, being being confident in the room. I went from being a litigator at an international law firm to going to work for a public company. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm in a whole new water, an ocean. I don't know how to swim here. But at the end of the day, I was smart, I'm intelligent, I was very capable. And my prior general counsel who hired me, his philosophy was I hire the best athlete, right? And you might not know how to swim now, but you will. And you're a good athlete and you will figure this out. I wish I had more confidence when I was a younger in house lawyer sitting in a room with business colleagues to kind of voice my opinion. I didn't really get that confidence until some years later, right? Just got more comfortable, understood the business, understood what it meant to be an in house lawyer, understood how to approach a commercial agreement, understood how to approach advising the HR team in labor and employment issues, understood how to deal with trade compliance and M&A, right? I wish I had more confidence because I tended to be a little bit more quiet and reserved. And I think at the end of the day, they hired you because they think you have good judgment and they want to know your opinion.
Hmm. Absolutely. And when you're saying something with confidence versus you're saying something without confidence, you might be saying the same thing, but it's a different thing altogether. How do you suggest lawyers can build their confidence?
I am a natural curious person and I love learning. And I even said, I still have kids that live at home, but once if and when they go to college and they're out of the house, I told my husband I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to take courses. I don't know what I'm going to take, but I'm going to take courses because I love learning. I If I could be a professional student, if I could get paid to be a student, I'd be a student. I think building confidence is learning by getting to know material, whether you're in a public company, reading the financial statements, reading, the 10Ks, reading about products, getting a hold of white papers, getting a hold of product manuals, learning. The more you learn, the more you know. I think the more confident you are in the things that you're being asked to advise on. So, and that's why I love actually being a general counsel because it's fun to learn about these products that we're developing and building and commercializing and putting out there and that are having impact on our customers. Um, Again, I was thinking about the question you just asked earlier, which is, I wish I was more confident. And that came through time because it took me time to understand the company and understand the operations. If there are things I could do more in retrospect, read more, sit in more meetings, um, contact the product marketing team and ask them to walk me through, provide demos of products, right? There are things I probably should have done earlier, sooner, and faster that I think would have helped me um, integrate a lot faster.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that, Anna. Tell us about the toughest challenge you face in your career, the toughest deal, toughest and work environment, or anything which changed you as a lawyer or as a person?
Yeah. Yeah. There was a particular transaction that I worked on that took, transactions could take anywhere from days, weeks, months. And this transaction took almost a little bit over than half a year. And the way that we do M&A at my current companies, we don't have a dedicated lawyer that does M&A. Everyone gets chance to do a transaction, and my one of my former bosses used to call it cake. Right? Everyone gets a slice of cake, but you don't want to eat too much cake because then you get really full. And I was working on a transaction, and it was 6+ months, and your day job doesn't stop, unfortunately. So I'm still doing commercial work, and I'm still doing advising on labor and employment, and I'm still doing, supply chain and procurement advice. Um, and then between dinner and a movie, I'm working on a transaction, and it was exhausting. It was exhausting to maintain my day job and also do the transaction work. And that was a moment of reflection when that deal closed. It was a moment of, oh, I've given a huge sacrifice to this company. Um, and I think management recognized that it was a big sacrifice, and there was acknowledgement and a reward at the end of that. But it was challenging. It's challenging because, as we started, the this notion of work-life balance was was the toughest challenge for me at that period in time. And I had young children, which made it very difficult and challenging. And I felt like I wasn't being a good parent at home, and I wasn't being truly a good employee because my attention was pulled in two different places.
Mm.
Transactional work really can become all encompassing.
What do you advise to lawyers, younger lawyers who are going through this journey, will go through this journey, and if they're involved in certain transactions in which they are feeling, you know what, I'm not 100% here, I'm not 100% there, I'm making sacrifices. Sometimes we like making sacrifices. So sacrifices you like to make. Some people don't like making those sacrifices. Um, what advice would you give to younger lawyers who will go through this dichotomy in their life, for sure?
Yeah, I think, and the advice you only can see once you're on the other side of the experience is, it's a period of time, right?
Mm,
It's a period of time where you're making this sacrifice, and you will get through it. The resilience and toughness and the courage you will have after going through the time sacrifice. You will have more perspective on what's important and what isn't. And I feel like life has a way of rewarding you for that, right? Assuming you do a good job, people will recognize that, understand that you're ready for the next challenge. But just remind yourself, this is a period of time. You just got to get through this period of time, and there's light on the other side of that tunnel. But it's really hard to do that when you're in the thick of it.
absolutely. And when these problems come on you, this pressure come on you, your character is being shaped. You're shaped
Yeah.
as a person.
Yeah.
And that diamond has to go through extreme pressure to become a diamond. And do you believe pressure is a privilege?
That's a good way to put it. Never thought about it that way. But it is a privilege. It is a privilege because, number one, you have a job. Number two, you're valued. People think that you can do this, and they put you in that situation. Number three, experience, particularly now as I'm in general counsel, each one of those pressure points or those pressure cooker situations gives you the experience and the knowledge to advise on the next deal, the next transaction, the next risk issue. It is a privilege to be able to have that experience, so then you can then advise for the next. It's hard to see it. It's hard to like think it's a privilege at the moment, but certainly now where I sit, if I hadn't gone through that experience, I wouldn't have the knowledge that I have today. I wouldn't have understood certain risk points. I wouldn't have understood certain business models. I wouldn't have seen different negotiation strategies. had I not gone through that experience, it certainly is a privilege to be able to have that experience. I never thought about it that way, but yeah, that's a great analogy.
Thank you. And they chose you to go through all these tough situations because they knew you are the worst person who can do it. And you are the person of capable of doing it. And you are the person who can deal with this. And that shaped you as a person. You just shaped your character, shaped you as a lawyer, shaped you as a person who can handle so many things at the same time. Of course, there's some sacrifices here and there, but it shapes us. It shapes our character.
I'm eternally grateful for the folks that have given me these opportunities, right? Had I not had these opportunities, I wouldn't be here today in my role with the experience that I have. And so it takes folks that have belief in you and that believe you can do it. Um, so we owe it to the next generation to give them those opportunities so that they too can then eventually, sit in these seats and take on these roles.
Brilliant. And now, what is success for you?
That's a tough question. I mean, it's success. I think is multifaceted. I think uh, personal and professional fulfillment, um, and it's my success may not be my neighbor's success versus the next general counsel success. I think for me is being proud of the company that I work for, being proud of the accomplishments of my team and of myself. I think success is having a healthy family. I have a husband and two kids, and it's important that they are happy and healthy because I think so much of what we bring to work is buoyed by our personal lives, right? Um, I think success is helping others. So much of my role is enabling others to do their job, right? I'm enabling the commercial team to achieve deals. I'm enabling the operations team to be able to run and operate efficiently within the confines of, risks and regulatory requirements. Um, Helping others do their job is very important to me. Um, and I think success is, you know, just getting fulfillment out of what I do on a daily basis, right? I wake up and I add my contributions to my company, to my team, to my peers, to everyone up and down the organization. And if I'm helping them do their job, I call it a successful day.
Hmm. Brilliant. Uh, are you a workaholic?
Yes, my husband would definitely say I'm a workaholic. I am a child of immigrants,
Okay.
um, parents who had, very low level education, instilled in me a work ethic like no other. And I think because of that, I have that, my husband says, it's like that immigrant mentality of like, you get it done and you make the sacrifices you need. And certainly that's what my parents did. And that's what they instilled in me. And my husband says that's who I am today, although he is reminding me to pause more. But yes.
Do you think lawyers are trained to have great work ethic and become workaholic? And because most lawyers I have met, especially in the US, and because they are getting $2,000, $3,000 per hour kind of fees as well in the outside counsel they're charging us, uh, they got to give their 100% and at their work and do many hours. Is the training, is it a, we have been trained to become workaholic? Is it an we have been trained to become extremely passionate about our work? Is there a training fault here?
Well, I think there's a financial incentive for lawyers to be workaholics, right? When
Okay.
you're motivating associates and partners by, bonus levels based on hours worked, there is a incentive for you to work in order to reap certain compensation levels. Um, I think there is because of that, and for those lawyers that follow the traditional law school law firm model, there is a mentality of you need to work X many hours. Um, I don't. I think there are certainly lawyers that are not workaholics that have other that are able to kind of pause and reflect a bit more than those that are kind of go go go. But I think the nature of our work requires us to put in a fair amount of hours,
Hmm.
unfortunately.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
when your husband or family tells you to pause and reflect, do you pause and reflect?
Probably not right that second. I'll say, wait, this needs to get done, or I've got this deadline. It's driven by certain whether it's time sensitivities or personal end goals. But as I've gotten older, uh, and as I've seen the world as it exists today, and seen what happens when there's a go go go, even personal health, right? Uh, I'd like to be around for a long time, and it makes me realize that there needs you do need to pause, you need to refuel, you need to replenish, you need to recharge, because that's what's going to enable me to stick around for the long haul.
Hmm. And if talking about we advancing in our age, if you had to look back your career and your life, and what advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah. Um, I think one thing is to embrace imperfection, right?
Mm,
I, was a good student, worked hard, got good grades, and just felt like success was perfection, right? Everything needed to be perfect. Uh, and you just had to have, things had to be figured out. You needed to know what to do next. And I think we should, and again, it's much easier for me to say in my role, much harder for probably my 20 and 30-year-old brain to comprehend. But you need to embrace the imperfection, because things will come out of that then maybe allow you to course correct or see things in a different way. Um, so not everything has to be perfect. And I think as soon as you let that go, you'll be a little bit, don't be so hard on yourself. You'll be able to kind of flourish a bit more, and enjoy those moments as opposed to uh, trying to aim for perfection in everything. I think another thing I would tell uh, my younger self is, you know, this life is a marathon, right? We sprint. I think about from high school, you sprint to go to college, then you sprint to go to the best law school, and then you sprint to go to the best law firm, and then you sprint to become a partner or to go in-house. But this is a marathon we're living, right? We're living a life not only professionally but personally, and enjoy the ride. Don't rush things, take it as they are. And again, maybe there's a detour. That's okay, because you will figure out the new path. Maybe paths diverge, maybe paths will reconverge. But just remember, we are in a marathon of an experience called life. And it's not over once you get there. It keeps, you think you get there and okay, we're done, right? You've reached the epitome. There are still other plateaus to see, there are still other experiences to be had. And just remember that.
brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah.
Let's switch topic to your current role and AI. And how big is the legal team in EFI?
We went through a series of divestitures the last few years, and so currently the legal team consists of 3 lawyers and a paralegal legal operations manager. Previously, I had a team of 5, but we some of the lawyers have left with as we kind of carved out certain business units
Mm,
that were acquired by other either private equity or other companies.
mhm.
So it's a quite
Okay.
small legal team,
Mhm.
but I think with AI, it has allowed us it has allowed us to punch above our weight, right?
Mm,
I think AI, it's become a first pass reviewer. It's become a tool that allows us to get kind of the lower level work out of the way so that we can be more strategic thinkers. Um, and I think AI really, I was telling my team, you need to get on this bandwagon because if you don't, you're going to get left behind.
And with the AI coming in, how do you think the role of a general counsel or CLO has changed?
I don't know if it significantly changes the role of a GC or a CLO. I think it's going to change a lot of the role for the more junior lawyers, right? Because they're going to be able to do things like contract revisions, issue spotting, risk summaries a lot quicker. Although certainly if you're a solo GC and you're doing that kind of day-to-day work, then that will just help you get first pass reviews of things done. Um, I think AI is going to give GCs more metrics so that the legal function can become more data driven. I unfortunately I don't have a budget that allows me to have a lot of kind of software tools, but AI has allowed me to provide certain data points that then can turn around certain kind of predictive analytics or dashboards that I wasn't able to get previously because otherwise it's a paid for SaaS product that I would have had to acquire that unfortunately didn't have the budget for. And I really think AI is going to help GCs, particularly GCs of small legal teams. Um, it's going to help them be able to perform like large legal departments, right? I think it does level the playing field. You got large companies that have hundreds, if not thousands, of lawyers. Um, you know, I've got two lawyers working on commercial contracts, but they are there just like any large commercial transactions team. And I think it's because AI has helped them become more efficient.
Brilliant. And when you are, let's say, using AI in the legal function, or let's say any other team wants to use AI, what role a GC has to play to make sure that we're compliant, there's no risk associated, there's no privacy issue. So how does the GC ensure that AI is being adopted by the company without many speed breakers?
Yeah, so at my company, it's actually a cross-functional effort.
Hmm.
In my partnership with my IT group, who is responsible for cybersecurity and data privacy, it's a joint effort, right? We've drafted an acceptable AI use policy. We've implemented certain safeguards on how the team needs to kind of vet procurement of certain AI tools. And we circulate this policy and actually we have a platform that requires everyone to kind of acknowledge receipt and review of the policy to make sure, it's permeated, to make sure that it reaches the entire global workforce. Because you might have some user in India who's using an AI tool. You might have someone in China, right? We are a global company, and we need to make sure that everyone understands the implications of AI use and is aware of what happens when you upload confidential data, trade secret data, proprietary personnel data, and when you can use it and when you can't, and what tools you can use and what you can't. So we have circulated a policy. We have a forum, a committee that meets. We have people that route questions to us. We have a procurement process where we've incorporated, a cybersecurity review, a data privacy review, and again, because my legal team is embedded with all these functions, um, it's quite common they will ask us questions, right? Like, can we turn on this AI feature of this existing marketing platform? We've got this tool, we're going to turn on the AI feature. We'd like to procure this piece of software for AI. It's an AI tool. So I think we've done a pretty good job. I'm sure there's potential users out there where we don't know the use cases, but we're trying to do our best to kind of track all the AI usages, and use cases for even our products within our organization.
I was reading a article by Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, and he mentioned that they've stopped hiring the L3 and L2 and L4 engineers. Now, L3, L2 engineers were the engineers who were coding, and L5, L6, L7 were the ones who were reviewing the code. Similarly, a lot of lawyers also stopped hiring the younger lawyers, the younger associates, because the AI can give you the first draft, the AI can do the legal research for you, and now it's improving over the last 2 years. Do you believe that the younger lawyers will have difficulty finding jobs?
They might. It's possible. But one thing that I think we all need to recognize, and it applies whether it's a legal role or an engineering role, um, there's still some contextual nuance to using AI, meaning you get some feedback, you need to trust but verify. And the AI will replace certain roles, but it doesn't entirely replace the human element of taking the AI output and then implementing it. Maybe it's easier in a engineering situation, but certainly human lawyers, you know, human lawyers, robotic lawyers, I suppose, but human lawyers, um, they understand products, company politics to some extent, investor motivations, right? Power dynamics. These are things that AI, at least I haven't seen AI figure this out yet, right? And so it might replace the junior lawyers needing, again, my team is so small, but you might have 10 commercial lawyers that just review contracts. You might not need 10, but you still need that one or two that is going to be able to take the AI output, either determine whether that's even appropriate in the context because you're negotiating with a strategic customer that that won't accept certain viewpoints. You might be engaging with a supplier that you're actually trying to extract some other value out of it that the AI doesn't understand. So I think there's still a human element to the work that lawyers do that AI will not be able to replace, at least not in the current model of AI
Hmm.
that we see
Okay.
today.
And we spoke about budget earlier, that legal teams have smaller budgets, and now the outside counsels are charging $2,000 an hour, $3,000 an hour. They are also perhaps using AI, but a lot of them are not passing on the benefit to the client. Do you think lawyers in-house can do a lot more work in-house because of AI, and they will be outsourcing less and less work to the OC, to the outside counsel?
100%.
Mm.
100%. I also see, and this is not AI specific, but the $2,000 an hour lawyer is typically, what we call big law, right? In the US. Um, what I'm seeing as well is a shift in mid-size specialty firms, right? These could be former big law partners or associates that are deciding we're going to hang our own shingle, we're going to create a smaller firm. Um, and they have the big law training and expertise, but then are kind of catering to a market of, you don't have the budget to pay for the $2,000 an hour lawyer, and they're going to market themselves and they're going to cater to those companies that want to pay or can pay, maybe $500 an hour or $700 an hour, but are still experts in their field. So certainly I'm seeing an emergence of these former big law creating their own law firms and grabbing a certain amount of market share, for those types of in-house legal teams that don't want to pay the price of big law. I think big law will always serve a function, right? I mean, you see these massive multi-billion dollar deals, those lawyers are always going to be there. You're going to, those companies are going to hire the best of the best. But there's a lot of business out there, a lot of business.
I'm one of them. I was in a big law as well, started my own firm. Yes, you're absolutely correct. That's a trend. Um, Tell us about what keeps you up in the night when it comes to AI.
My company has global operations. We have over 1,000 employees in multiple jurisdictions. We've put out an AI use policy that says, certain commercial-minded AI can be used, provided you don't input, confidential, proprietary informational, personally identifiable information. I'm always nervous that someone out there has put company information out there, right? Like for example, in ChatGPT, there's a radio button. You can, I forgot what the exact prompt is, but you can say, "Don't train on my data." And we certainly have put that requirement in our AI use policy to tell folks if you're using, commercial grade uh, AI tools, ensure that it's not, ingesting your data. But even before that, you shouldn't even be inputting confidential proprietary data unless it's, again, properly vetted, confirmed, how the security. That makes me nervous, right? There's tools out there, and I would hate to wake up one day and see some AI response that somehow ingested some company confidential proprietary information and provided that to someone else.
Hmm. Okay, brilliant.
And I don't, it's hard to solve for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you tell people, here's the rules, here's the guardrails, and you need to, hope that people abide.
Hmm. Interesting. And if you had to start your career all over again in 2025, with so much of AI around, how would you restart your career? How would you do your career?
Hmm.
This is the question is basically for younger lawyers who are graduating this year, next year. And if they have,
Yeah.
with so much of AI around, how should they approach their career?
Gosh, that's a tough question. I feel for the young lawyers that are, law students that are graduating, because from what I hear, it's a tough market. I think they need to learn these tools, right? They need to learn how to use these tools, just as I'm learning how to use these tools, right? I guess I would say it's no different for me, or else I'm going to age myself out of the role if I don't know how to use these tools. So I think, you go to law school, you learn about contracts and tort and criminal law, but you got to learn the tools that are going to help you do your job. And that applies whether you're working it in-house or at a law firm. I think learning AI tools is key.
To learn all the AI tools, whatever your hand you can put your hands on,
I
and
mean, there's so
because
many out there.
yeah,
Yeah, there's so
mm,
many out
yeah.
there now.
Mm, mm. I also noticed in your career, Anna, that you were working in EFI, you left EFI, joined EFI again, and now you're a CLO at EFI. Tell us about this transition. How should lawyers, how can you guide lawyers? How do you switch your jobs, and how do you make a career, and what jobs to pick, and how can that happen smoothly for our audience?
Yeah, I think my career path is fairly atypical in that I went back to a company that I had left. And I did it because I was given the role of the general counsel. Um, I went from a law firm to in-house. During my in-house experience, I actually was on an expat assignment. I lived in Spain for 2 years. And then EFI at the time was a public company. It was acquired by a private equity firm, Cirrus Capital. And I had spent already 6 years at the company, and I thought, it's been a good run. I was returning back to California after living 2 years abroad in Spain, and I thought, I'm going to try something else. Here I am. I'm living in Silicon Valley. Let's try our hand at a startup. So I went to a startup, and was there for just shy of a year, actually, barely made it a year, when I got a call, and I was asked, "Do you want to come back to EFI as the general counsel?" And again, very atypical for someone to return, but it was for the right role, and I took it, and I've been here for 5 years in the general counsel and now the chief legal officer role, and it's been a great ride. Um, I couldn't have predicted this. I couldn't have predicted that I would have returned. But I've grown immensely in the last 5 years as a general counsel, as a people leader, as a management member. Um, and it's been a great experience.
Brilliant. How does a difference between a general counsel and chief legal officer? How does the roles and responsibilities change and differ?
I mean, to be to be fair, sometimes they're one and the same. I think for small companies, there oftentimes no legal distinction. I think the legal distinction oftentimes comes in those larger companies where, uh, you know, a general counsel may be purely legal, and then doing legal work like commercial. And then you might have a chief compliance officer who is a lawyer but doing compliance and ethics and other parts. And oftentimes that reports to a CLO. Sometimes the CLO might have a title of chief administrative officer because they're doing operations and HR. I think in EFI's transition from your traditional general counsel role to the chief legal officer, it was more aligning it with my peers, right? Aligning it with the titles of the chief human resources officer and the chief operating officer and the chief supply chain officer, right? So I think EFI management particularly was aligning the roles of the executive members. I think in other companies, there will be a distinction of general counsel purely doing kind of your maybe more commercial and the chief legal doing kind of management, strategy, M&A. And I think every organization will vary.
Mhm.
I don't know that there's a universal rule, but I'm sure if you talk to a recruiter, they'll tell you the general distinction.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. My last question to you, Anna, would be uh, what legacy you want to leave when we leave this world? How do you want the world to remember you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I want folks to remember me as first and foremost um, an empathetic leader. I again, I think there's plenty of smart lawyers that can get the job done and advise on risk and advise on compliance. Um, what I think folks will likely remember me for is just the human nature and the human element of the job. Um, you know, I care about my colleagues. I care deeply about, their personal lives and what's going on with their families and their parents. Um, I think that human element, bringing that human element to what we do, makes it feel like there's personal relationships, right? That we're not just, robotic people doing our jobs. And I like to think that I lead with empathy. And I think that's so important, particularly in today's day and age where, there's plenty of, um, rough and tough, let's, get decisions and be aggressive. But I think when you lead with a human element, everything else naturally will fall into place.
Mhm. And did you learn that from?
So my parents, my parents who were immigrants ran a Chinese restaurant. And I worked at the Chinese restaurant since I was, 5 years old, right? Whether sweeping floors, washing dishes, being a waitress, I grew up working in this restaurant. And I would see my mom, in her broken English, talk to customers, right? And if, at the end of the day, she's trying to make a living, but she developed relationships with customers, repeat customers, customers that came every Friday or every Sunday, or and she'd give them a little extra in their order, or she'd give them a discount. And that human element, at the end of the day, you're one of the questions you were asking about is, where can you make the most money? Yes, we're all there. She was trying to make money, pay the mortgage, but there was a human element to her running her business, to getting to know the people, her customers, and that helped her be successful, helped the restaurant be successful. And I think it showed me there's a human element to everything we do.
Beautiful.
We're all trying to everyone wants to get ahead, but we're all humans as well. And, it's important to get to know people, understand where they're coming from. And I think it helps you do your job better.
Mhm. Brilliant, brilliant. And that's a very powerful lesson. And just by giving somebody a little extra, you convert your client into your fan. And if you're serving with empathy and compassion and love, it helps you grow the person. It helps the person who is coming to you for some work, for some help. This is a beautiful lesson I also learned. And there are many other lessons I've learned from you today. And I really want to thank you for this honest conversation and honest answers. And so empathetically and authentically you shared your answers. And this is very powerful, very, very enlightening for our audience as well. Thank you so much, Anna, for your time today. I really appreciate your time.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun, and happy holidays.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anna.